discussion topic today is, what do I think you need to know as a technology entrepreneur? We'll get into that here. First, I'd like to give you a little bit of my background, and then I'll talk to you about what technology entrepreneurship is, and then we'll talk about this whole range of things that I think you need to know to be a good tech entrepreneur, and we'll talk about where we go from here. And so, 1979, I was 14 years old. My dad brought home a Heathkit, and it was one of these build your own computer from a kit kinds of things. This was in the era when, so look inside this photo here, you see lots of little parts. They all came in little bags and boxes, and you had to solder the pieces together or bolt the pieces together or whatever else. It wasn't like today when you open up a computer and you see a big old board that you can just plug on there. You see a couple of circuit boards, but that was a tenuous relationship. It was a lot of little tiny resistors and capacitors and transistors that you'd solder into these circuit boards. And it was a lot of fun. For a 14-year-old, what a project. Now, today, what kinds of things do you have? You have Legos. And how many of you like doing Lego puzzles? Puzzles or kits, whatever, building things. And I love this sort of thing. This was my intro to computers. And it was this lump of hardware sitting on the table when we were all done. And it said it worked. Well, now what do you do with it? And so I had to figure it out. And I was just hooked. I was totally hooked on software and programming. And I ate it up. Well, so I knew I wanted to do computer science for my undergrad. And then when I was done with my undergrad, I knew that wasn't enough and I needed to study to the level of a PhD in computer science. And I did that here at BYU thinking, oh, I'll just go, I'm doing these interesting startups. There's this one problem I'm trying to work on that I know I need a better education for. This will make me a better entrepreneur. And what happened was I got to know the business school faculty while I was doing my PhD in computer science. And they said, oh, you ought to come apply for this IS position, information systems position we have. And so I kind of jumped tracks there. And I've been doing that and have been enjoying it. And I still sometimes I get to scratch that entrepreneurial itch a little bit. All the time I'm working on interesting projects. I feel a sense of mission and purpose about what I'm doing here. And I've always got something going on. I'm never bored. I've developed software for little tiny devices. I've developed software for mainframes and for everything in between. Right now, I have been doing a lot of mobile development. And so I teach courses in iOS, Android, and web development. And if you're into information systems, if you've had a couple of semesters of programming, then you can come take my grad classes in mobile and web development here. And one of my favorite projects is my scripture citation index that Dick Galbraith and I have put together. He's kind of the idea guy, and I'm kind of he's the domain expert, and I'm the technology guy. And here you see some screenshots of, that's the Android app on a tablet. Anyway, how many of you have used this before? Okay. I hope it's been helpful. If there's a scripture that you want to find conference talks related to, you go to this index and you look up, 1 Nephi 3:7 or something, and you see all the conference talks that quote that scripture. And it's a great way to put together some talks to get quotes from different speakers in general conference. Anyway, so I've had a lot of fun building stuff over the years. I love to be able to build. Now, how many of you want to start something? All right, give me some sense of what things you want to start. Any ideas that you feel like you want to do? Anybody willing to say out loud? What do you want to do?
Wireless processing.
Wireless processing of?
Just data.
Data, just anything. Okay, great. Others?
Well, my brother and I want to make a work. My brother and I want to make a workout app because we hate all the ones that we use.
You want to make a workout app because you don't like the ones that you use and you know how you could do a better one. I love that. You see what the pain is and you know what the answer could be, or at least you can play around with it and come up with a better answer than you've had so far. I'm currently doing the 100 push-ups program, so ask me later in the semester how I'm doing. I've done this before as well, but in 6 weeks you get to a point where you can do 100 push-ups in one set, theoretically. The first time I did it, it took me 8 weeks. But dang it, I got to 100 push-ups in one set. And I wouldn't say they were all really excellent push-ups, but anyway. Workout app, awesome. Okay, other ideas.
Scientific outreach and research.
Scientific outreach and research. Okay, and do you have an angle on that you are pursuing?
Making radiation less scary and more fun and improving the research for it.
Making radiation less scary and more fun. I have not heard that one before. That's cool. Okay, so you have ideas, and that is really interesting to me. Are you an entrepreneur yet? Now, what is an entrepreneur? Now, if you look at the French, it literally means undertaker. Is that okay? Undertaker. Okay, not in the sense of mortician, but one who undertakes something, one who commences and does something, one who undertakes an enterprise, one who owns and manages a business, a person who takes the risk of profit or loss, according to the Oxford English Dictionary. Well, so if that's entrepreneurship, what's tech entrepreneurship? For me, my definition is that it's the creation, cultivation, and management of ventures whose core products are based on information technology. So, information technology. What's your favorite technology? Shout them out. What's your favorite technology? Anybody?
Phones.
Sorry?
Phones.
Phones, smartphones. Any particular brand?
No, just as long as it works.
Just as long as it works. Okay, we're students still.
Linux console.
Linux console. Okay, there's an interesting technology that buries some hidden secrets. And there are some really interesting statements that you can make, like awk and grep and sed. And if you understand Linux console, you get some of those words.
Embedded systems?
Embedded systems like what?
Like Internet of Things or wearable devices?
Okay, Internet of Things or wearable devices. So how many of you are currently wearing a device? Watches mostly? Anything other than a watch? Anybody wearing something that's not a watch or a Fitbit? Okay, that's a pretty common one. Internet of Things, you might have a smart doorbell. You can capture video of what's going on your front porch. And they'll save all that stuff to the cloud if you're willing to pay somebody a subscription fee, typically. A lot of opportunity in IoT, Internet of Things. Okay? Sorry, Sam, I'm just going to keep moving. All right, so with technology entrepreneurship, what's typically pretty true is that they scale nicely. If you open up a lawn mowing service, that's a little hard to scale. The way you scale it is you hire more people, but you have to buy lawn mowers or get your employees to provide them somehow. But you've got to get equipment. You've got to go knocking on doors to drum up clientele. It's a little harder to scale lawnmower technology than it is to, say, scale the Apple Watch or the iPhone or something like that. Anyway, so what happens with a technology entrepreneurial opportunity is that you create wealth, and that wealth helps you to be able to make a bigger difference in the world. Who has the most money in the world right now?
Bezos.
Jeff Bezos, until he gets divorced. Yeah. Okay, and then he and his wife share that, 50-50 or whatever, I don't know. Okay, who else has the most money in the world? Apple. So, but that's not an individual, that's a company.
Whoever the U.S. owes.
Whoever the U.S. owes. Yeah, okay. I better move on to another subject now. But anyway, these people have resources to do interesting things. And this often happens to entrepreneurs. Initially, they're seeking funding. Later on, they become the ones who have resources and do the investing. And you have an opportunity not only to make a difference with the products that you create, you have an opportunity to make a difference with the wealth that you create. You bless lives. You employ people. You make a difference when you enter this world, and technology entrepreneurship is easier to scale than other forms of entrepreneurship, often. Okay, now, I'm academic director of the Rollins Center. That's one of the hats I wear here at BYU. And as academic director of the Rollins Center, I'm very interested in the programs that we do. And I'm not going to tell you everything about the Rollins Center here today, but I want to tell you a few things. The world that we live in now is increasingly networked and digitized. Now you can be riding down I-15 as a passenger in the car, and you can be communicating with whoever you want, whether it's text or voice call. You can maybe even do a Marco Polo while you're riding as the passenger in the car. And I'm being real careful about saying you're the passenger, right? Okay, don't text and drive. And you can be doing internet, you can be looking stuff up. It was unimaginable when I was your age that we would have that sort of capability. It blows my mind to think about, okay, what's the biggest hard drive somebody here has? Does anybody have a 4 terabyte hard drive? Who has video guy. Who has a bigger hard drive than 4 terabytes? Anybody? Okay, well, 1 terabyte was amazing to think about when that first came out. You can go down to Costco and you can plunk down less than $100 and you can get multiple terabytes of hard drive. And it's super reliable. The first hard drives were just lousy. They'd last a little while and they were like 5, 10 megabytes. Megabytes. Okay, so yeah, and I'll tell all the other stories about how when I was a kid we had to go uphill in the snow both ways to school, and anyway. But our world is increasingly networked and digitized, and when you look at what the implications of that are, they're really profound, they're deep, and you have grown up differently than the generation before you grew up. You're used to different things than the generation before you. You're used to being able to text. If you're bored, you've got a phone and you've got something to do, and you're always connected. As we were looking at what was coming down the road decades ago, the question that we raised is, why couldn't our students be the ones to go out and make the difference? Why couldn't our students create the next YouTube or Google or whatever the thing is? Why couldn't our students be the extraordinary entrepreneurs that we see out there? And the answer is you can. And you do all the time. Who are some of the local entrepreneurs that you've heard about recently? Qualtrics, Ryan Smith, and his dad, Scott Smith, was a marketing faculty member here. Josh James, Domo, and before Domo, Omniture, okay? All right. There are students coming out of this program all the time who build huge companies and make a difference in the world. Why can't it be you? Well, it can be, and that's what the Rollins Center exists to do. Let's talk a little bit about knowledge that you need. I think it's really important to understand the difference between an idea that you think is cool and an opportunity that's worth pursuing. Totally different things. An opportunity worth pursuing is one where you see that there's actually a market and you really can make it. So the first skill set, I would say, you've got to be able to identify and develop ideas that are opportunities worth pursuing. And the lean approach that we advocate here at the Rollins Center is super, super important. One of the fathers of this whole approach is Steve Blank, and his blog is pretty good. I would recommend that you go to steveblank.com and do a little digging around there. He has a Udacity course that talks about what lean startup is. And one of the books, so let's see, we've given you the option of either Nail It Then Scale It or The Innovator's Method, right? Either of those books will talk about this approach, and they're really good, and you owe it to yourself, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, to do it the lean way and figure out, how do I develop my customer first? Because in the old days, we used to spend millions of dollars developing a product, and then we'd take that product to the customer and see, can we convince the customer to buy it? That's the wrong way. You waste millions of dollars that way. Develop the customer first, and then build the product to match the customer's requirements, what they'll pay for. Anyway, so lean is absolutely the right way to go. The last big startup I was involved in was not a lean one, and the product, multiple millions of dollars in, and the product, although it was a great product, the customers were asking for something a little bit different. It's hard to match those up. Okay, now, you need to learn about how you create, manage, and finance a venture. And we've got classes here at BYU that will talk about it. You need to learn how to sell, because you're always selling. Always selling. You're selling prospective co-founders first. You're selling prospective employees. You're selling prospective customers. You've got to learn how to be good at telling your story. You've got to learn how to either bootstrap or raise money. Bootstrapping is a healthier approach if you can do it, but not every startup can do it. if you need to have a $10 million marketing campaign, you're going to need some capital. And probably that's not a bootstrapping opportunity. But if you can bootstrap, that'd be excellent. And then you control more of your destiny if you don't take somebody else's money. You need to learn how to build teams and how to get those teams to really do a good job, really work hard. There is a big difference between just a team and a really effective, high-performing team. You've all been on those, right? Where there have been teams that have been kind of, we're just here doing it. And then there are those teams that you feel like, yeah, we're really making progress. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff that you need to learn as a tech entrepreneur. And so how many of you are in the business minor? Okay. And how many of you are in the entrepreneurship major? Okay, a few more hands. How many information systems majors here? Okay, a few more hands. And any graduate students here? One? Okay. All right, now, what other majors are represented? Or what colleges? How many in engineering? Physical and mathematical sciences? Nursing? Okay, education. Blank on the education college. Fine arts, communications? Family, home, and social sciences? Let's see, what have I not listed yet? Oh, business, other business majors. Okay, that accounts for a lot. All right, good. There are programs all across this university that will help you develop various kinds of skills. It's great to partner your skills from your own major with skills in innovation and entrepreneurship. And hopefully we'll inspire you this semester with some of the ways you can do that in this lecture series. But there are also some other classes you can take if you're interested in more entrepreneurial skills. Has anybody here taken 101, Entrepreneurship 101? A couple, all right. And there's the Innovation Boot Camp and Startup Boot Camp that are one-credit experiences that are available. You go on a Thursday evening, or no, you go on a Saturday first, basically all day Saturday, and then Thursday evening to wrap it up. And so it's a real condensed experience on principles of innovation and startup ideas, startup principles. There's this lecture series. There's also basic entrepreneurship skills where you can work on a company with one of our faculty who's a mentor and has been a successful entrepreneur. So lots of classes available, and there's plenty more. And besides the Rollins Center, there are other centers, like the Ballard Center. They do a great job with social entrepreneurship. How many of you have an interest that's more social entrepreneurship, some social good that you're thinking of doing? So a few hands. I'd encourage you to get to know the Ballard Center as well. Lots of clubs on campus. You ought to get involved in the E-Club. Many of you, if you're technology oriented, maybe AIS is one for you. But anyway, get involved in the clubs. And then the other thing I'd say is get involved in the competitions. We will give away hundreds of thousands of dollars this year to BYU students. And we do that because we want you to have resources to be able to build cool stuff. So we have the Miller Competition Series. There's a business model competition coming up. There's at BYU, then there's an international business model competition that we sponsor. There is the Miller New Venture Challenge Finals coming up in April. Each team that is a finalist in the Miller New Venture Challenge Finals gets at least $15,000. The BYU app competition, appcomp.byu.edu. If you're developing some kind of an app, mobile, desktop, watch, whatever, you can submit that. In fact, last year we had an Alexa skill. Somebody did a game, Escape Jurassic Island or something like that. You've crash landed, a dinosaur is coming towards you, what do? Run or hide? And then you answer back, hide. And then it tells you how you die a horrible death. Anyway, so the app competition, we try to incentivize you to do some cool things, to build some cool software. So check out all of these competitions. There are resources available, and every year some students who would do well in the competitions miss the opportunity because they don't know about them or they don't think they can compete. You can compete. Let me just encourage you. And then the role of mentoring is really important. You are going to run through this really. So if you're going to be an entrepreneur and you're going to do a startup, it's kind of like sailing into shore through the coral reefs. It's easy to get caught up on some rocks and to dig a hole in the boat and, you're toast. Mentors will help you to avoid some of those reefs. They've been through it. They know where the gotchas are. They know where those potholes in the road are if I start mixing my metaphors here. So come and get to know some of our mentors. You can either go to cet.byu.edu, our website, or you can stop by 470 Tanner and just talk to us and find some people you can talk to help you to know where to steer your ship. Lots of readings. We talked about Nail It and Scale It and the Innovator's Method. I've listed some. Oh, and by the way, Sam has these slides and we'll post them after class, so you don't need to write all this stuff down. But you got to read. You got to be dialed in. You got to be dialed into the best practices and the learning that people are sharing, and not just books, but blogs. Maybe blogs are more important even. I would, if you're wanting to be a good entrepreneur, I'd follow Steve Blank as an example. Okay, and then we've got a library down in 470 where you can check some things out. So, and there's a lot more. You've got to understand trends. You've got to stay up on top of things. So what are the hot technologies? I've listed social networking and mobile computing. Internet of Things was already mentioned. 3D printing is a big one. Blockchain is a big one. What other hot technologies are you aware of? AI is huge. You hear AI all the time. AI this, AI that. AI is going to change the world, and we have movies about it, you know, and we're going to be master. The technology, AI is going to be the master. We're going to be slaves to our AI overlords. Okay.
Containers and serverless computing.
Okay, containers and serverless computing. All right.
Autonomous driving.
Autonomous driving. Makes me a little nervous.
Just better batteries.
Better batteries. Oh, if you could get a 10% improvement in battery efficiency, you will be wealthy, wealthy, wealthy.
Virtual reality and augmented reality?
VR and AR, yeah, those are really hot now too. In fact, when Apple released their iPhone 10, they changed the orientation on the camera so that it's vertical for the two lenses so that it would be better at AR. Because what happens is you'll turn it this way, and then you'll be able to see sort of a landscape view, which is good for doing augmented reality kinds of applications. Anyway, has anybody played with an augmented reality technology? Anybody here? Which ones have you tried?
Well, I was at the Consumer Electronics Show last week, and I tested out something that's actually meant for like construction workers or engineers. So it's like a set of goggles that you wear in front, and you can like check things off and check things while you're.
Oh, interesting. So a set of goggles for a construction worker or an engineer that lets you check things off and interact with an information system that's helping you. And there was another hand over here somewhere. What other technologies have we tried with AR? Please.
Play different board games in AR.
Oh, play different board games. Okay, so wizard chess or whatever else maybe.
I mean, most of us have probably done Pokemon Go or Ingress. Those are technically AR. not
Okay.
fancy.
Okay, Pokemon Go or Ingress. Yeah, I have a rough idea of what you're talking about. Okay, yes?
The measurement app in iOS.
Measurement app in iOS. It will let you do a pretty decent measurement of how long something is. Yeah, okay. So AR is a big one. All right, you got to stay on top of technology if you're going to be a tech entrepreneur. You need to learn how to see trends coming. And so either you've got to be a geek or you've got to have a good geek as a partner. One of the two. So, pick your poison. And you also have to be good at business, and you also have to be good at interpersonal relationships. You've got to be able to communicate and relate and connect. So those are, oh man, that's a lot. Okay, well, let me now go through three fundamental concepts that most of your technology opportunities are built on. We'll talk about the network effect, Metcalfe's law. We'll talk about principles of disruptive innovation. And we'll talk about exponential technology growth, or Moore's law. Okay, network effect. A network effect occurs when a product becomes more valuable as more people use it. An example is the telephone network. Alexander Graham Bell invents the telephone, and he's got one telephone here and one telephone there, and so you've got two endpoints that can talk. How good is that? How valuable is that? Well, it's pretty valuable. You've got two units of value sitting there. One end can communicate there, the other end can communicate here. What happens when the network grows and you add 100 more people? Now you've got 100 people who each can talk to 99 other people. So now you've got basically 9,900 units of value. You've got kind of this exponential growth of value. We see it in other technologies as well. In fact, let's talk about English language, which you might not think of as a technology. But if you want to be a software developer, so much is written in English about programming languages and how do I use programming languages. I've got this bug, I'm looking for help. You've got to be able to read some English to get to a lot of the help that's out there on the internet. Knowing English is a really valuable skill, and so because of that, a lot of people want to know English, and you can talk to more people, they can talk to more people. All right, let's keep going here. So Robert Metcalfe was the founder of 3Com. He's the fellow who invented Ethernet. Ethernet is that network connection that it's a little wider than a telephone plug. Telephone plug is like 4 wires and Ethernet is like 8. Anyway, he invented Ethernet, and his law, Metcalfe's law, states that the value of a network increases in proportion to the square of the number of users. So if I have 5 people in the network, 5 squared is 25. So I've got a value roughly proportional to 25. Now let's scale it up to 50. What is 50 squared? 2,500. So 5 to 25 versus 50 to 2,500, that's exponential scaling here. It's significantly more valuable to have more people there. Well, what happens here is the initial cost of a network is large, but the incremental cost to add a single user is pretty small. If you wanted to build your own cell phone company, that'd be tough. You'd have to go to all these cities everywhere. How much do the cell phone companies spend on network upgrades every year? Any idea how many billions of dollars it is? Okay, well, you can go look it up. It's going to be tens of billions of dollars are being spent every year on cell phone equipment throughout the U.S. And if not hundreds of billions, I don't know. It's at least tens of billions. Maybe not hundreds, that's maybe too big, but at least tens of billions. To build that network, if you wanted to compete with Sprint or Verizon or AT&T, you'd have to have a huge investment. But to add just one little user, that's not tough. Just takes a little connection fee, right? There's not a lot to add one user. So what happens in this scenario is if you get that situation where building the network is expensive, adding one user is not expensive, and the network becomes more valuable when more people use it, then you get a winner-takes-all effect. So you get this feedback on comparative utility. So let's think about the iPhone. How many of you have an iPhone? That's the majority of the class. How many have an Android phone? Okay, that's a minority. Now, globally, that flips. Globally, more Android users, but in the US, more iPhone users. Okay, why do you want an iPhone? Tell me, why do you want an iPhone?
Really easy to use.
Easy to use. Security. Now, you Android people, is your Android easy to use? Do you have good security? Okay, keep going.
Because the people I know have iPhones too.
The people you know have iPhones too, and you want to be like them, or what is
Well,
it?
there are features that are between the phones.
There are features like iMessages. You can see the blue message bubble when you know you're talking to another iPhone user. And there's AirDrop. You can AirDrop your photos to somebody else, which you can't do to an Android phone. You have to text them or email them to an Android user. Okay, so there are these little things they do. Users like to buy iPhones because lots of developers write software for the iPhone. Developers like to write software for the iPhone because lots of users buy it. And Steve Jobs, by the way, did a really good job of teaching us how to pay 99 cents for a song and then 99 cents for an app. And so developers said, oh, I want to go to the ecosystem where they'll pay me 99 cents for an app. Android users hardly ever do that. iPhone users do it less and less than they used to, but it's more common on iOS than on Android. But anyway, because of this, you get this cycle that feeds back to itself. As you get more developers, you get more users. As you get more users, you get more developers. And pretty quickly, you get to a monopoly situation, a winner-takes-all kind of a thing. And yeah, there can be room for 2 players like iOS and Android, but what happened to Windows Phone? If I say Windows Phone, does anybody here laugh? I see some smiles. Some smirks. Okay, there wasn't enough room for a 3rd one. But anyway, there was enough room for 2. But winner takes all when there's a network effect. That's what happens. It's a lot of money to invest and develop that network, but adding just one user is not hard, and it's this cycle that gets created. Okay, now, next idea, principles of disruptive innovation. You've maybe heard of disruptive technologies, and you want to develop a disruptive technology, right? You want to disrupt the market. Well, here's what's going on behind that phrase. A disruptive innovation replaces an entrenched technology. And it's not because it performs better. At first, it performs worse. The reason it displaces it is because it provides a better overall value. So you're altering the basis on which you're competing and saying, I'm going to give you better value, and that's why you'll come to me. I'm not going to give you necessarily a better product. Can you think of a disruptive innovation? Anyone? Smartphone. Uber. Better than the taxi.
Ryzen processors.
So Ryzen, so the brand AMD, Ryzen processors, so have they really disrupted Intel?
I would argue they've taken a significant market share.
Okay.
It hits up 10 nanometer well before Intel.
Yeah, but I mean, who out there cares? Yeah, 10 nanometers, 7 nanometers, or it works. It works. So I might argue a little bit on Ryzen, but yes, they have a very cool chip that could do better than Intel. I don't know if they have enough to overcome Intel's momentum. Amazon. Oh man, and Walmart similarly disrupted local retail. Okay, so every technology has a trajectory. Over time, the market gets more sophisticated. And what I'm showing in here is the low end and high end of what the market demands in terms of performance. When I was a kid, it was pretty cool that you had a standard transmission car with, actually I remember when power locks were not a thing. I remember power locks coming into vogue and thinking, man, that's cool. Oh, what, you can, on your key fob, you can hit the unlock or the lock? How many of you have power locks on your car now? Anybody have manual locks still? A few. Okay, this is a student audience after all. Be proud, own it, be proud. Okay, our expectations over time have gotten higher and higher for our car technology. We expect better cars today. Now, so here is, this green arrow is the progress that a particular technology enjoys over time. The market doesn't grow as sophisticated as a single product does. Let's talk about Microsoft Word, for example. Microsoft Word in the early days was a pretty low-end word processor. Over time, more and more features got added to it. Does anybody here today believe you know all of the features of Microsoft Word? I believe I do not. In fact, I know I do not, all right? But it has gotten more and more and more sophisticated over time. Okay, now, as a technology grows, competitors get introduced. So we have a disruptive innovation, and it has a technology trajectory. And at first, we look at that new technology and we laugh at it and we say, you are a ridiculous technology. I can't believe somebody invented you. That is silly. Because it's way below what our market demands at the low end. And we're way up here at the high end. But what happens is, over time, if they stick with it, eventually it gets good enough to meet the low end of the market. And where is the sustaining technology when the disruptive one enters the low end? It's way above what the market demands at the high end. And so, now there may be a few customers who want this really top performance, but the majority of the market doesn't want to pay for that kind of performance. They want something in here. And that's when the disruptive technology gets interesting and really starts to displace the entrenched technology. So what you do if you have a disruptive innovation, the typical approach is to say, I'm going to go to an unserved or an underserved market. You know, maybe there's a third world country that needs this technology, and they're okay, their low end is lower than the US low end, for example, and you can go develop it out there. You find a market that is not having their needs met, and that's where you develop it. And then you can come to the mainstream market later when your technology is more mature. Okay, so network effect is a winner-take-all, we get pushed to winner-take-all. Disruptive innovation, this idea of technology trajectories, and you got to watch out for what's coming down the road and grow with the market. And if you want to be that disruptive innovation, serve a market outside of the mainstream first. Now, the third principle is Moore's Law. Gordon Moore, co-founder of Intel. In 1965, he made this observation as he looked at the integrated circuits that they were building. He said, you know what, it looks like the number of transistors that we put on our integrated circuits is doubling every 18 to 24 months. Now, if you go to Wikipedia, you'll find a graph like this. I don't know if this is the latest from Wikipedia or not, but you can look up the article, and this is pretty much what we call a log linear graph. You see, essentially from this diagram, every 24 months since the year I was born, the number of transistors on our integrated circuits have been doubling. So what happens if you can double transistors? Okay, there's the line. I didn't realize I had an animation there. That line there is doubling every 24 months. And you see that the different processors from Intel hover around that line as we go over time. So let's think about doubling. What does doubling do for us? All right, well, over time, it doesn't take very many generations before doubling adds up to a really huge number. In fact, there's a story that's told about the emperor of China who fell in love with the game of chess. And he went to the inventor of the game and he said, oh, this is a great game. I'll give you whatever you want to reward you for this wonderful game that you've invented. Whatever I want? Well, just grant me 1 grain of rice. What? 1 grain of rice? 1 grain of rice for the first square on the chessboard. I'd like 2 grains of rice for the second square on the chessboard, 4 for the third square, and so forth until we cover the board. So the emperor thought not long enough and said, okay, great, we'll do it. Now, what happened when the emperor tried to fulfill that wish? How many grains of rice did he have to come up with? 2 to the 64th, which is unimaginably large. I think that's more than there are atoms in the visible universe. Anyway, doubling gets out of hand real quickly. So, since 1965, how many doublings should we have expected now? How many years is it since 1965? 53, 53 and a half, 54. Let's say 54 because we want 2s. Divide that by 2, 27 doublings. We should have had about 27 doublings now. What's 2 to the 27th? Anybody have a calculator? 2 to the 27th.
134 million.
134 billion? Million. Okay. Computers today should be 134 million times more capable than computers when I was born. I was born in 1965. Now, when you put more transistors onto a chip, you can store more stuff, you can compute more things, and because you're putting more onto this little, and somebody mentioned 7 to 10 nanometers, you can get things closer together than before. And when things are closer together, you can communicate faster. And your smartphone is probably doing billions of operations in a second. That Heathkit I showed you at the beginning would do 2.5 million operations in a second. And so now we're at least 1,000 times that since I was 14 years old. Okay, so we have these trends that converge. You get more computational power. You get more storage capability. You get more network bandwidth, the ability to send things back and forth much more quickly. How many have fiber to your home or apartment? Do you love it? Do you love having fiber? Lots quicker than what we used to have. And all of this happens at a decreasing cost per unit, and we're connected everywhere, as I mentioned earlier today. So what happens is you increase speed and capacity and you lower cost, and that gives you the opportunity to process information faster, and so then you can rethink your operating procedures and you can innovate. And when you do that, you develop new goods and services that you take to market, and you make lots of money doing that. And your network effect, assuming you have one, increases the demand for more of your technology. And so you spend money on research and development so that you can do more of these things, and you go back around this cycle. And this happens over and over and over again. This happens all the time. You get this cascade of advances, and it never ends. And the pace of change in technology has been, for my entire life, has been wildly changing. And for your entire life, you've seen growth. You've seen stuff that was probably unimaginable when you were born. And now we see the businesses starting to change just as rapidly as well. Apple used to be the most valuable company in America. That changes. Microsoft used to be the king. You don't really think of them anymore. They're kind of a quiet king. Used to be IBM. So the players change. The tables turn. Business changes very quickly. You live in a world of change. And so I think you need to have the ability to look at the world around you and see where's the pain and where can I add value. If you go to somebody else's company, your job isn't safe if you just listen to what your boss tells you. You've got to figure out, how do I understand this company and work to add value where I am? I think you need to understand the competitive drivers of whatever company you go to, whether it's your own or somebody else's. And you've got to figure out how to add value there. And you can't just be a technology guru and say, well, I'll answer your questions when you come to me. I'll tell you what the right way to do things is. You've got to really understand the bottom line of that company and drive value. I think you need to figure out, how do you use IT to solve the business problems you run into? You need to retool over and over again throughout your careers. I can guarantee you things will change on you. Every year in my mobile and web dev classes, I have to retool because there's some technology change. Sometimes it's more radical and sometimes it's less radical, but I'm in a field that changes all the time. How many of you care about quality of life? That's a very typical characteristic of your generation. You want a good quality of life. And so you got to somehow manage your career to balance things appropriately. You might even need to invent your own job. We continue to hear that more frequently. Well, lessons learned. The business environment is evolving really rapidly. There are these mega trends that you see out there: cloud computing, virtualization, Internet of Things, 3D printing. Social network is still a hot thing, although Facebook is under fire. All the social networks are under fire from politicians and society and other areas. Mobile devices continue to be a game changer, and all kinds of mobile, not just smartphones, but all kinds of other things. Apps that are context aware and that use a little bit of AI to help you. Okay, the first time I went to Hong Kong, my Google phone, I think that's what I had at the time, or maybe it was a tablet, one of the two, it was giving me all these suggestions of things I should do. I thought, man, this is incredible. It knows that I've moved from Provo to Hong Kong, and it's trying to provide me a whole new set of information to deal with this new context I'm in. That was it was a little spooky to me what it was suggesting, that I thought, yeah, I really want to go do that, actually. And anyway, VR, virtual reality, and augmented reality, I think, are poised to make a splash. Of course, more with AI, and I think blockchain will continue to hear more about that. And here's just representing that your hardware will increasingly become sophisticated. Here, Craig Federighi is demonstrating how the iPhone 10 is able to map your face, and then you're able to make some changes on his live photo that are mapping that mask right to his actual face dimensions. Hardware will continue to change, and you've just got to keep on top of it. So this semester, watch for these things. Watch for network effects, watch for disruptive innovations, watch for exponential technology growth, and the use of socially networked and mobile technology as people come and present, and think about how you can use IT to transform and to innovate. I would recommend that you get involved and network with others. You got to do that if you're going to be a successful entrepreneur. Here's my contact information and Rollins Center stuff. As my parting shot, if you go to the Rollins Center website, I suggest you check out Mentoring Student Advisement Session and go talk with one of our students who we've hired specifically to help you figure out what are the resources here on campus that'll help you in your own startup. I hope this has been helpful to you. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for being attentive, and I'll see you guys next week.